Grazie all'assessore.
Thank you.
L'assessore parlava appunto di salvaguardare
The regional minister was talking about safeguarding the sector, and I think that Mauro Bruni mentioned this briefly, in that safeguarding a sector, you need to be integrated as an industry. The Canadians have planned the whole chain and the production of legumes, for example, since the international demand is on the rise here. Now we have the whole industry here represented, and maybe perhaps this can be an occasion for us to start a dialogue that is rendered a bit difficult amongst the various stakeholders of the industry. I'd like to start by asking questions to the farmers and producers proper. So I'm going to ask Dino Scanavino to answer first. Dino, my question for you is this. And since we're talking about the whole chain, the industrial chain, it's relative to the contracts. Can these contracts be a tool that can be used to safeguard the durum wheat sector in Italy? Will the farmers use them to their utmost value? And do you think they can use them more and more? Because I think that only a small amount of farmland is covered by these contracts. Any instrument that is apt for negotiation, any instrument or contract that is linked to an industry, is linked to the general situation of the market, the stocks, the possibility of usage of these stocks, and the ability of users to utilize the right amounts of the product so that the market can be balanced. Relationships amongst the various players in the industry is fundamental. We have always supported this kind of contract-based system. I'm convinced of the fact that the farmers are the weakest link when we're talking about contract, and their weakness stems from the need to deliver a product, basically. So they have fewer positions they can defend themselves on. And I'm sorry that the regional minister is not here, but the political arena has to protect them. The industry-wide contracts can be favored and encouraged or not, depending on the behavior of the players. So if the virtuous behaviors and approaches are set into being, and all the channels need to take care of them. If not, you have to defend the weaker players, and for us these are the farmers, the producers. This doesn't mean that we're in a war or battling with each other, because this is of no avail for anyone. The important thing is that in order to keep a system in a balance is important for everyone, from the farmers onward, and it's also a local value that becomes national and goes beyond that, because if we are to have a bad year like last year, we need to protect these areas of the market. Thank you. No doubt, as you were saying, the industry-wide contracts are an instrument, part of the instruments, but the main thing is to manage the whole industry, the stocks and the seeded surfaces. So the word that we often use is interprofessionalism, which is a coordination of all the various actors involved, with a coordination of all these steps from production to seeding and so on. So now I'd like to ask Onofrio Giuliano from Confagricoltura the following question: what is the position of your organization, and why is it that in Italy we're talking about this interprofessional relationships, but then we're practically unable to roll it out in a concrete fashion? Thank you. This is a nice question, and I don't think I can answer in 5 minutes. Confagricoltura has been trying to do this for at least 20 years. We've been trying to attract attention to the fact that we need interprofessional relationships. Interprofessional relationships are also envisaged in the EU regulations, and it could actually lead us to be able to talk about this over and beyond the markets, in sites and locations and moments when we're better balanced to tackle these issues. In Confagricoltura organized a meeting in Foggia. It was called the Land of Wheat, and because we wanted to have all the people involved in cereal growing. This is not a very rich chain of production, but it is an industry where that attracts a enormous number of people and their interests who are not at all in line with the intrinsic value of the industry. The value produced in a hectare in terms of wheat is very low. It is extremely low, even when we're looking at the historical data concerning wheat. So if considering that we can use this value so that people can make profits, everyone, the millers, the traders, the producers of parasite-resistant agents, and so on and so forth. In Canada, there are 4 varieties of wheat. In Italy, we have 64. So my question is this: can we really sit around a table and establish the rules by which we act and establish the levels below which we cannot go? The production this year is linked to the decline in prices we had last year. I really appreciated what Mr. Bruni was saying, but I didn't find the broken down data. We know that nationally the investments have declined in the cereal growing industry, but we have to look at the local data as well. Especially in southern Italy, the decline in prices was devastating for the sector. So let us not be too late in this, because otherwise we might not be able to recover. So we have to look at interprofessional relationships that are coordinated very seriously. I think that the industry-wide contracts are fundamental. They are contracts in which all the players of a certain industry establish certain elements that will have to be complied with once, for example, the wheat is delivered to the millers or to the pasta makers. It is necessary for us to start interprofessional relationships that are proper. With these interprofessional relationships involving all the players of the industry, the wheat growing sector will attract the interest of politicians, because politicians are called upon to deliver resources for modernizing the handling locations, to counter the price volatility. With our Minister Martina, we talked about various solutions, and I know that talking about labeling is something that not everyone accepts. But we have to understand that somehow we have to have some safeguarding activities. Because looking at the various thousands of cereal growers, there are very few, let's say dozens only, of big companies. So it's absolutely necessary for us to start interprofessional relationships that work and that can ensure everyone's interest.
Thank you very much. Therefore, interprofessionalism is the key. Well, we've been talking about interprofessionalism for years, and not just for cereals. And it hasn't taken off yet. Franco Verrascita, tell us, can this give us a future for Italian durum wheat, or is there anything else we can do to improve the situation? We discussed prices, the measurement of prices, CUN, KUN, etc. Is there a key that might open this door, that might help this industry not to go ahead? First of all, I'd like to thank you for inviting me. And I'd like to say something right now. This is a very important opportunity for farmers and processors to talk. We owe this to all the producers who have been experiencing this terrible situation. My first question is the following. It's a question that we're all asking ourselves. Of course, numbers are very important, and we're aware of them. But besides that, does this industry have a future? It's a question I'm asking myself, not a question I'm asking you, sir, not supposed to answer. Yells from the audience. There's a profitability problem. 300,000 farms risk to close down, and we're risking to lose hundreds of thousands of hectares. And there's an additional problem, as Onofrio said. These surfaces are likely to be forsaken and desertified eventually. According to the data we heard, this year's production will decrease by 1 million tons and surfaces by 10%. Millers are wondering whether low prices risk to lead to the death of this industry. The only sure thing is that farmers are the weakest link of the chain, and they have been paying for everybody else. But let's try and see what we can build on this basis. Does the whole supply chain really want to rescue this industry? So I'm asking millers, pasta makers, stockers, what will their contribution be? We are willing to contribute whatever we can, but we're asking for the same contribution of the industry. We cannot dump our losses on farmers. If we want to undertake a serious initiative, we must decide to share in the losses and in the gains. We don't want to take anything away from the industry, but we all know how cheap pasta is. We're all supposed to earn something in order to be able to survive. What we need is an agreement between all the participants in the supply chain and a partnership regarding losses and earnings. We are in a condition to make an important contribution, and I'm wondering whether you think that the ministerial decree offering money, that money is too little. Either we invest for real or this industry will die. My proposals concern the whole supply chain, and we have to decide whether we agree or not. What actions should be undertaken? First of all, competitiveness in production processes. No competition exists on the basis of cheap products. Two, we should somehow orientate supply. We produce what consumers ask us to produce. Three, modernization of structures, starting from silos, for instance. We know that silos, their size is such that we are forced to put good wheat and bad wheat in the same silos, and this, of course, damages the good wheat. And then what I call aggregation. This is very important. But the Northern Star is availability of surfaces and availability of product, or else everything is pointless. A partnership with industry, with the big purchasers, and then there's a financial aspect. Why don't we talk with banks about possible advances to farmers so as to help them to survive? In practice, what is needed is investment. Farmers cannot invest because they are already indebted. If we want to save this industry, we need to invest. And we need guarantees that farmers cannot provide. Rural plans, rural development plans, whole regions spend their money on buying school buses. This is ridiculous. We need money for farmers. And we should all make an effort. Now, about transparency, prices, and who has to decide what. Regarding CUN, that's not something that helps to solve problems. Commodity exchanges, on the basis of my experience, they are not of much use. So what are we supposed to do? Serious interprofessional agreements, establishing the price upstream. Agreements that should not be yearly. They should last 3 years because a certain amount of product of a certain quality should be guaranteed. This will be helpful for the industry. Non è cambiato niente. A number of important concepts have emerged. We need rationalization, we need reorganization. And this is where we should start from if we want to reach interprofessionalism. Giorgio Mercuri represents the Italian cooperatives. I think that partnership is essential. I think that's what we should aim at. A few strong characters. An attempt to solve a crisis in the market, prices, risks linked to the weather, because the 10 million made available by the ministry, which of course are not sufficient, can be used in cases of a crisis such as the one that we had last year. That's why I'm saying that we have to develop actually useful instruments, because 10 million euros represent 100 euros per hectare, and this is ridiculous. Good morning. This is a strategic area, and it is important to add value to our pasta, which is internationally known. What can cooperatives do? Less than 50% of us belong to cooperatives. Us who work in germ wheat consortia, and also structures which do things other than those that we do in the area of agricultural production. Over 30% of cooperatives do handling and storage. We are not in a condition to be effective on the market. There's no critical mass, hence no added value. And this is a decision of our own partners, because cooperatives are governed by partners. Regarding the delivery of goods, 80% of partners still want the so-called conto deposito, deposit account. And this is a weakness, because not only does it not give the product the right value, but we have two subjects who are not in a condition to follow the market. On one hand, we have the farmer who provides the product and should decide when he's supposed to sell it, but he knows nothing about the international market. And on the other hand, we have the cooperative, which is not in a condition to meet the demands of the industry, because it has to stick with what the farmer tells it to do. And this is an inherent weakness whereby our production cannot be boosted. In Italy and in Puglia, in some cases, things are different. The board of the cooperatives told farmers, if you want to deliver your wheat, we can do it otherwise. We will try to do the best. If we succeed, you will appoint a new board, but we will try to do the best for you. And this is important. Either we succeed in developing contracts for the whole supply chain, or we will fail. I'm saying this because there are some new elements on the market which were mentioned this morning. The decisions of other countries as to what and how to produce, but also the consumer's decision about the product they purchase. Europe is setting up new tools on the basis of the request of several associations, I can start for instance, and we asked for a reduction of the intervention limits from 30 to 20%. We asked for an ad hoc measure related to risk management, which is not the 10 million euro intervention, which is pointless, but some form of intervention which may put farms in a condition to produce with a certain amount of certainty as to their income. Our relationship with industry are difficult. How can we implement new industrial projects if each one of us goes on its own? These tools may become operational. If they do, they will be operational as of 2018. And if we're not ready, we won't be able to put in practice all these new opportunities. In addition, as Patrizia Marcellini said this morning, the Ministry of Agriculture did something in the area of the risk of incomes, not risk for incomes. Not a lot of resources, and the way they have been applied, they will not be helpful. They will be collected by insurance companies, because the way the system was developed is theoretically very good, but very hard to implement in practice. In Europe, what we're trying to do, and at the Ministry, what we're trying to do, and we hope to have the support of everybody, is represented by mutual funds. Through the added value that we may provide on certain contracts, we can create rolling funds to help us in the case of the drop of prices. We're trying to attribute a certain amount of certainty to prices. There are resources that may be used. Think of insurance companies and others that may be used as mutual funds. They cover different interests. On one hand, we have lobbies. On the other hand, we have small groups of farmers or cooperatives. And that's why we're asking for the support of the entire supply chain, because this might be very helpful in the future. I'd like to call everybody's attention on this. We have a lot of problems. We know them all. I'm a farmer myself. Without processors, millers, and pasta makers, we have nothing to do with our wheat. It is necessary to find an agreement between the various partners of this supply chain. This agreement should be enforced by all the parties. The 100 euros per hectare are not real aid, but they are a stimulus to start this project. Money should come from the market, not from the EU, not from the government. The EU should be exploited for systems such as risk management that cover special cases. What we need is a recovery of the market, and this can only happen with a common effort by the whole supply chain. So we're not here to talk about the problems, because we all know what the problems are. We're here in order to try and exchange ideas to safeguard Italian pasta, to make it more competitive abroad. But this should be done with an effective production. And this can be achieved not by discussing and fighting, but by letting everybody understand what are our difficulties. Because moving from a standard product to a high-quality product forces the supply chain to make steps forward. And that's where the supply chain should be helped. We need research. in the farming and in processing. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mercuri. Giorgio, the things that you were mentioning already exist. There are some mutual funds that have been used in different fashion, but they're used in the United States. Their mechanisms are similar to those of insurance companies, so the 20 million euros, rather than giving them to insurance companies, could be given to a fund that is owned by the producers, agricultural producers, and as for the supply, there are things that exist for the production of wine and for the production of milk, where the product is delivered. And if the board is doing things properly, it will be sold. Now, from this point of view, I have a question for Giuseppe Ferro. Based on your experience, in the rest of the world, in the cereal producing sectors, are there other models different from ours, similar to the models Giorgio Mercuri was talking about, with an aggregated supply? Well, first of all, I'd start to define who is buying in Italy. The millers or integrated miller pasta makers? Well, in Italy, there are producers and traders who are small-sized. In Canada, you speak with 5 companies. In Italy, there are 500 of them. And who makes up the market? The mass distribution in the world? Well, when you're ready, they require contracts. You will have to estimate a price from June 2017 to 2018, and the pasta maker will have to be able to consider all of this. It's easier to safeguard your positions vis-a-vis 5 people than 500 people. So what is the solution? Well, in industry-wide contract and quality. In Puglia, you have to promote quality and it needs to be paid for. Now, why does the industry contract work? Well, when a consumer goes to the supermarket, that consumer has a guarantee of quality and will pay for that quality. That's it. Thank you. Now, the topic of integration comes back when we speak of another sector, yet a small sector in Italy, that regards the north of Italy, with the cows for beef production. We have many people who go there and buy the animals to repopulate the livestock population, and then we complain because the French come over and do this. So aggregation is fundamental for all of this, to look for a solution to the problems of durum wheat. Now, going back to the international scenarios, since we talked about the supply side of the market in Canada, I would like to ask Cosimo De Sortis just how much international markets, based on your experience, have an influence on prices in Italy. Well, good morning, and thank you for having me here. When we look at this point, we have to say a couple of things first. Durum wheat is a commodity. In the definition of a commodity, there is a principle that we need to accept, the fact that it is replaceable. Now, this means that this is also part of a globalized market. So if we look at the actual outlook for the market, we have to accept the fact that domestic prices are affected by the prices in other countries, and specifically other countries that export to Italy. Then we need to consider that Italy is physiologically a country that needs to import its durum wheat. We cannot do without this. If we want to eat 12 months a year and we want to eat pasta, this is necessary. And also if we want to continue. There are protests from the audience. Durum wheat is a commodity. They're saying it's not a commodity. I'm going to continue with my reply. We're looking at the pricing from international markets. I am on your side, but durum wheat is a commodity. Until it becomes part of a production chain that is well identified, that has its own logo or mark or trademark, it can be considered something else. Up to that time, and when that occurs, it is to be considered a commodity. Just to complete my concept, I need to say, Mr. De Sortis is saying there's a volatility in the prices of durum wheat, and it's become structural to the sector. So every year we have to look at some changes, significant changes at the prices at an international level. Often the changes are broader than the profit margins that the companies typical of the industry have. I'm talking about the farms, and I'm talking about the various companies that will work on the product. We need to neutralize this volatility. Now, how is this possible? Well, this can be done by proper planning. Planning is based on the idea of coverage. And so we have to use this principle. This has to become a mantra for our industry. In other words, we need to tackle volatility using coverage strategies. Now, this means that we're going to be asking our farmers to make a progress in terms of their cultural mindset. You have to change the structure of their supply to cater to the needs of the industry. The distributors are the ones that steer all of this, and so they ask to have pasta for long periods of time. And so as millers, we need to just follow the needs and demands of our clients. And this means that we need to start upstream with the farmers, who will need to accept the idea of becoming more professional in managing their supply and catering to the needs of the industry. We do have contracts. This is a starting point. And we need also to understand there is another term that we need to base our choices on, and that term is quality. Then if we look at the various trends in terms of production, we've heard a technical speech at the beginning of today's meeting. It was very interesting, and it focused on the fundamental data regarding the main areas of production. I'm not going to go into those figures again, but I can confirm what we've already seen for Italy. There has been a decline in the surface area planted for durum wheat. That should, however, go back to a normal production for a normal yield. And then there are other countries that export to Italy. In those countries, there should be an increase. And then from other areas like Northern Africa, these are countries that import Italian durum wheat. This can yield a stability, and I think the stocks will be important coming from the exporting countries in North America. Fabio Manara from Compag. We already talked about quality and the origin of productions. I wanted to ask you just how much can these two factors have an impact on price fixing? Good morning to everyone. As stockers, we act as amortizers between you and the millers or pasta make and the millers. What the industry has in mind for you as producers. We have the batches, we stock them separately, and then we try to solve a quality issue, which is what the industry wants, and the financial issues that the producers are looking at. Now, if we were to consider just how much the origin of a product has an impact on prices, well, we need to talk about planning. Anything that is, we talk about protein, weight, and electrolytic weight. So I wanted to just go back to something that was Patrizia Macellini said at the very start of our meeting. If we look at the diagrams and the plots, we've seen so many of them that we might be tired of doing so, but in the past few years we've noticed that there was a swing in prices, and now we're down to the minimum, and in the next few years we'll be at a greater price. But this has an impact on all the industry, starting from the farmers up to the stockers and so on. We're not saying that we're not going to be eliminating these swings, but we need to reduce these swings. So what I'm looking at here as a tool for all this are the contracts, the industry-wide contracts. Sooner or later, when we'll finally decide not to be warfaring all the time, but to just sit down and decide on a price range that will protect the industry, the stockers, and the producers. Thank you. Thank you, Fabio. I think that we're very close to the point in which we're going to stop warfaring. The past few years have gone badly for farmers. We're late on the schedule. We don't have time for other presentations, but I do believe that this morning was very interesting, and I would like to just mention a couple of things. First of all, from the technical data we've heard of, knowing the markets, knowing what happens throughout the world, getting to know the quality of our competitors is important for us to keep a bridge of those markets. Another consideration has to do with the Roundtable and therefore the political aspects, strategic aspects. Firstly, aggregation and industry-wide contracts. And then another point, however, is that those of you who are involved in milling the product, we need to actually come together to a table. We'll try to do what we need to do, aggregating production, but you also need to follow us, and we'll sit together and see if we can find an agreement that will save the farmers, but also add value to the milling process. So that's going to be the topic of our subsequent event, and thank you all for being here.